So hello, everyone. Um, my name is Allison Samuels, and I am here on behalf of the Level Up Project, which is an initiative that I officially began over the last few months, but is something that in many forms has been on my mind for years. I am honestly still in a bit of shock that this is actually happening right now, and that all of you are here, and that hundreds of people around the country and around the world are participating in this project, which we officially launched not even a month ago. It is truly humbling. I am beyond thrilled to welcome you all to our very first ever workshop week. Like, this is the third one ever with the Level Up Project and supporting our vision of accessible education and knowledge sharing and network building. All of us at the project have an innate sense that the industries we work within need to change, and that we are individually responsible for helping that shift along. It is through both small and daily habit changes alongside collective action that we think systems can be created to support more people. And right now, you are part of that creating. An idea that I have been returning to a lot in the last few months, articulated by activist and abolitionist Mariame Kaba, is that we don't have to build things that last forever. We should not need a project like this to exist in the first place, because free and accessible education and knowledge sharing should be baseline. I started this project as just one of many resources and stepping blocks on the way to greater equity in the physical skills-based fields of predominantly craft and design. And I do consider food and the creation of food to be a craft. That's why we are doing this one right now. It already feels like this project is growing and shifting to better serve everyone who would like to participate. And it is a dream to be part of this collective building project with all of you. This model works, that is, allowing anyone who wants to participate for free, including materials, because we are collecting all the dollars into one pot and then redistributing them back out. We believe that everyone contributing in accordance with their wealth and privilege is one way to achieve a more equitable social system. And it has been really exciting to watch this happen in real time as you all are making it happen. We can build a framework, but if you are not here to participate, then it doesn't work. So thank you. As a reminder, all proceeds from our ticket sales and donations through our website are going to Arts Business Collaborative and Map for Youth, which is a mutual aid project. And if you feel strongly about the project, we do invite you to donate through the website and or through Eventbrite. It's still up through the end of tonight. I'm going to be the admin for this workshop. Feel free to drop any questions into the chat box or DM me separately if you don't want your question going out to everyone. I will be turning off my sound and collecting all of your questions and either chiming in real time if it seems pertinent to the discussion, or saving your questions for a bit later if they're not addressed by Hannah during the workshop. And we'll pause at around like 15 minutes or so towards the end, specifically for questions if there are any that we've gathered. Hannah would love your participation. And since this is a big group, again, we ask that you please turn on your video and turn off your sound. So like, if you haven't already muted yourself, please mute yourself. And also, obviously, like, this whole Zoom thing is new to me, so, and to Hannah, and the Wi-Fi is like a little funky, so if there are any technical glitches, apologies in advance. Feel free to like ping me as the admin, and I will do my best to address any trouble in real time. This workshop is being recorded and will be hosted on our website and sent out to all of you as a link about a week after the workshop. So you can keep looking at it and practicing your knife skills with Hannah. And on that note, I would like to officially welcome Hannah Wong, who is the chef and owner of Hema, a street food inspired and community focused restaurant opening in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn in 2021. Since graduating culinary school in 2012, she has worked at restaurants such as Gramercy Tavern and Battersby, while also doing stints in private events and catering. In March of 2019, Hannah and her business partner, Yen Go, opened Van Da, a modern Vietnamese restaurant in the East Village. She is also an executive chef at One to One Foods, a company that partners with local restaurants to create meal kits and provides culinary resources for food insecure families in Brooklyn. It brings me some special joy to have roped Hannah into this project. She has been an incredible support system for me personally over the last bunch of months, and I could not be more thrilled to be sharing this with her. And on that note, I would love to turn over the virtual floor to Hannah to get started.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Is this volume good? Great. So many thumbs up. It's very heartwarming to see so many faces and names that I recognize, and also so many that I don't. So I'm very happy to meet you all virtually, and I would just like to dive right in if that's okay. So basically for the class, I want to start talking a little bit about knives, and then go into a little bit about knife maintenance. We'll pull out the steels if you have them, and just quickly go over like a honing 101 demo. And then we're going to go into knife work techniques. I don't know, I hope everyone has like a medley of vegetables, so like you can work on whatever knife cuts you can with the vegetables that you have. I don't want this to be, my intention was not for this to be something that people would feel like stressed about. It was more about just like getting the vegetables that you could and then like working with them. So whatever you guys have, I'm sure it'll be great. I'm sure you'll learn something. So, and then the sort of the last third of the class, we'll just whip up a very simple weeknight meal that's like a cabbage slaw basically with a corn chowder, or not a corn chowder if you didn't get corn. Right, okay, so knives. I'm assuming that everyone has at least a chef's knife, which is like sort of your go-to, like, usually between 8 and 12 inches. Kind of like should feel very much like an extension of your hand. So if your knife does not feel like balanced, it doesn't feel comfortable, like it's too heavy, it's too like the weight is not proportional, you might want to think about getting another knife, because the way that it feels naturally in your hand, I think is very important. It's like kind of like falling in love at first sight. Maybe it's just like one of those things, you know it when you feel it. So that's kind of how I choose my knives. I mean, obviously, I think one thing we could sort of talk about very briefly is the difference between Western style knives and Japanese knives. The biggest difference comes down to the strength of steel that's used. Western knives, like particularly German knives, are quite popular. The steel tends to be a lot harder. It's usually heated to a higher temperature, and so it is usually more durable. And as a result, it's a little bit harder. It takes a little bit more strength to sharpen and to maintain, but it actually does maintain an edge very well. So if you have a sharp, like Western style knife, you can usually count on it to be like quite durable. Japanese knives are a little bit more fickle. The steel is a little bit softer. It's a little bit more brittle, and so the maintenance is they're just a little bit more fussy. But because the steel is a little bit softer, they do have a tendency, you can get a sharper edge on them, even though it might be a little bit more temporary. So that's, for me, that's kind of like the major difference between Western and Japanese style knives, and it's really about preference. If you feel like you don't have the time or the wherewithal to maintain a knife, like probably a Western style, like a good German knife, like a Wasabi, is going to be like to suit you well. So I have a few knives on my board. I just wanted to walk you through them very quickly, just as kind of like a different, you know, a primer on the different kinds of knives that are available. This is my chef's knife. It is actually quite thin because I've had this knife for maybe 8 years, like since I graduated from culinary school, and I've actually like broken the tip. I've like dropped it on the ground many times, and so it's just gotten sharpened to the point where the blade is probably a 1/4 inch. Like I've taken off about a 1/4 inch of the blade, so it's quite a thin knife, but it is a chef's knife. I don't know if you guys like. I'm happy to see people's knives, but I'm gonna keep moving along. So this is like probably, as most of you guys know, is a paring knife, about 4 inches. We could use it for some of the things, but I actually really want to try and use the chef's knife for everything because I think it can be used for most of the tasks in the kitchen. But just for reference, about 4 inches, so like half the length of a chef's knife. This guy is like pretty freaking cool. This is a fillet knife, so it's sometimes people call it a boning knife. But this style of knife is actually very flexible. So I don't know if you guys can sort of see like how much this is bending. This knife in particular is used for filleting fish. It has a very delicate edge, so it's actually really good for cutting into like soft flesh. That was and also because it's so flexible, you can get very close to the backbone of a fish and allows you to sort of like carve off the maximum amount of flesh off a bone. So fillet knife, also a boning knife. There are different styles of this that are more well suited for poultry and beef and just like cutting through sort of like harder land animal meat. This knife is a sentoku. So this knife is defined by the shape. It tends to be, you can sort of see like the difference. Some people call this like a Japanese style chef's knife, but you can see it's more rounded. It is less suited for, as you'll see, sort of like this rocking motion that a lot of chefs sometimes employ, and it tends to be a little bit shorter and like a little bit more stout. So it's really a preference. Some people like prefer this to a Western chef's knife, but it's like aesthetic. And it's more about like what feels good in your hands, because that's like really what this is about. At the end of the day, is you want a tool that feels like organically an extension of yourself. And then the last knife I have is this really long, really beautiful knife. It's typically used for sushi, so like very fine, delicate knife work for slicing fish that you don't want to like ruin the integrity of the flesh. It's very long because when you cut into fish, when you're cutting sushi, for example, you really want the length of knife to like extend through, and maybe we can try and do this with some other with some vegetables, but you really want to be able to use the whole length of the knife. So the longer the knife is, the better the like slice of fish that you get. Because I think, I'm not a huge sushi person, but I do feel like a lot of people who appreciate sushi, a lot of what they appreciate about it is sort of like the integrity of the fish is maintained. So this is a slicing knife. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of everything except my chef's knife. And then very quickly, we're going to, also if you guys have peelers, could you rock those? We will use them at some point. If you don't have one, that's also okay. So if you have a steel, a honing steel, you guys pull that out. The ones that I sent out are diamond rod steels. There are also ceramic steels and just like regular steels. So ceramic and diamond steels have like just a coating of ceramic or diamond around the steel. The difference is that steels without ceramic or diamond tend to be a little bit more crude and rough, and so they're not as well suited for Japanese knives, which, like we talked about, where the steel is a little bit more delicate and brittle. So I sent out diamond steels. These will work for any kind of knife that you have. Ceramic is also great. Ceramic, I think, is the most delicate of all of them, so that will do the least amount of work to your knife. Just as a, like, I wouldn't, if you have a ceramic steel, I would not expect it to sort of like transform a dull knife into something that will slice a tomato. So there are a couple ways to hone your knife. And also I just want to mention that we are not sharpening our knives with this. We are realigning the knife edge. So there's a difference between sharpening a knife in which you're grinding actual metal off of the knife, and realigning the edge, in which, like, after you use your knife maybe 3 or 4 times, the edge, it's not that it doesn't get dull, but the edge sort of gets like wonky. I would like to show you a picture later if I can, but you'll just like see microscopically like teeth against the edge of your knife. So instead of it being one smooth edge, you'll see like serrations in the fine edge of the knife. And so what the steel does is just sort of like realign the edge so that it becomes nice and smooth again. I just want to quickly show you, if you do want to sharpen your knives, which I would love to do a level up workshop on knife sharpening at some point in the future. I just wanted to quickly show you the stones that, these are Japanese style sharpening stones, but they are, you can see that there's a grit level on each of them. So this is actually 2 different grits. One is 1,000 and one is 4,000. I usually start with the coarser, I mean, you always start with the coarser grit, which is the lower level. And then you can transfer to the higher grits. I also have an 8,000. And just the higher grit that you go, the more like refined your edge becomes. And then this is a very coarse, I think it's a 400. And this is actually for realigning your sharpening stone. So when you sharpen your knife, you use this enough, like it'll get, because of the pressure is not even all the time, the surface of your stone will become uneven. And so what this does, if you just, like usually I'll just put pencil marks, like grid the stone and then shave it off, so that by the time all the pencil marks are gone, I know that the surface of the stone is even again. And that's sort of how you maintain your sharpening stone. So that's just a little aside. Okay. Steel. So I think that the easiest way to use your steel is to, you can, like, if you're on whatever, if you're watching Top Chef, you'll see like guys just like doing all this stuff. It's for show. That is not like really the most, it's probably effective, but I wouldn't say that that like makes it any, I saw a question come up, but I'm gonna ignore it. It doesn't make it any, it doesn't make it any more sharp. I think that the easiest way to use a honing steel when you're just starting out is to put it upside down on your surface with a towel underneath so it's stable. And what you're really looking for with your knife against the steel is you want to start at the bottom of your knife. And the bevel of knives will vary depending on like whether you have a Western or Japanese knife, but usually it will vary between 15 and 25 degrees. Western style knives tend to be a little bit thicker. Japanese knives tend to be a little thinner. But when I look at the angle of the knife, I'm thinking of like a dime to 2 dimes worth of thickness against, away from the steel. So if this right now my knife is sort of like right up against the steel, I'm just gonna tilt it a little bit so that I can see maybe like 2 dimes worth of thickness, if that makes sense. And you definitely want to start from the butt of your knife. You don't want to start from the tip. And what you're going to do is pull into yourself. And you want to try and use the whole length of the steel as you're pulling in. So you're kind of pulling in and pulling down, if that makes sense. And you also want to start, I'm starting on my right side. This is the back of the knife. The front is where the edge first hits most of the stuff that you cut. That usually tends to be the second side that you sharpen. Whether you're on a stone or a steel, you want to sharpen the back edge of your knife first. It's because it creates a sort of like, when you sharpen it on this side, you create an edge that kind of comes over a little bit. And then you use the front side. When you sharpen the front side, that realigns it so that it's centered. But typically we start with the back just because the edge that you finish on, so if it's the front, which you usually want to finish on, that will kind of be the sharper edge, which is what you want typically. I'm happy to clarify later on if that makes sense. So we're going to start with the butt on our right side. Sorry if you're left-handed. I apologize. They do make left-handed knives, by the way, if anyone is left-handed. That is a thing. We can also talk about, sorry, there's so much to talk about with knives. We can also talk about bevel. Most chef knives are equally, the bevel is 50-50, which means that your knife sort of, the edge is equally sharp on each side. There are certain styles of Japanese knives that are, they're not 50-50, they can be 70-30, which means that the front side of the knife is 70, well, if you think of the whole edge as like one entire unit, the front side will be 70% or like 70 parts of the sharpness, and then the back side will be 30. There are also the Japanese knives that are even more extremely uneven in their sharpness, like 90-10. And then there are knives that are completely flat on the backside and just have the edge on the front side. So right now we're just sharpening for kind of like a 50-50 bevel. But just like if you have a knife that you're like, oh wow, the like front side of my knife looks a lot thicker, like the edge looks really different from the backside. It could possibly be because you have a knife with an uneven bevel. Okay, so the other thing to keep in mind when you're honing is to apply like some like pretty aggressive amount of pressure in the beginning. I think one thing people sort of, especially when you're new and tentative, you don't apply enough pressure, and then the steel doesn't actually do anything for your knife. So I saw something online that said you should push as if you're like pushing 4 pounds worth of whatever against the steel. So I don't know what that really, if that's helpful for anyone. I'm glad, but that is, I think the thing to keep in mind is really just like you want to be like, you don't want to, this is like a knife is not, it can like stand up to pressure. Like you don't have to treat it that delicately. It can withstand pressure, and it will need to withstand pressure if you're trying to like adjust the edge, which is like obviously why you're putting it on the steel. If there's a question about like how often you want to use a steel, if your knife is moderately sharp, I would probably put it on a steel like every 3 or 4 times that you use it. So like maybe once or twice a week, depending on how often you use it. I do feel like if your knife is sharp, honing it every once in a while will help you maintain it. I do feel like after maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, I would start to think about like actually getting it sharpened. Again, the honing is not sharpening, it's not grinding the steel, it's just aligning your edge. So it's good for like micro adjusting. It's not like if your edge is dull, this is not really going to do that much for it. Okay, so let's just, if you guys have a steel, pressure, butt of the knife, 2 dimes, and we're just gonna go back and forth. You can, if you want to, just do one side so you can sort of get into a rhythm. But you can see how I'm using the whole length of the steel as I'm cutting across the entire length of the knife. So I did that maybe like 10 times. So I'm just gonna go back. 9, 10. And then there's really no point in going fast. You really, I think, want to make sure that your edge, the angle that you're sharpening, whether it's on a stone or a steel, is consistent. Like, that is the most important thing. Once you establish where your edge is, you just want to maintain that angle. If you don't, you will just like end up screwing up your knife even more. So consistency, I'll just do this a few more times.
Can you bring the steel close to the camera and just show people the actual angle that you start at so that we can see the knife to steel a little bit better? Yeah.
Like that?
Like the 2 dimes worth, and yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit hard to see on the camera, but. And a good way to test your knife. Was that helpful?
Yes. Jessica asked if you ever sharpen the top part of the knife or focus on the base.
If you sharpen the tip of the knife.
Sure.
Versus the base. Yeah, I mean, like, so after, if you're working on the stone, so if I'm on a stone, for example, because the tip angle is a little bit different, like you're like definitely you have to focus on specifically sharpening the tip at the end. There is like a different sort of motion on the stone specifically to sharpen the tip. The base is kind of, I would say like for like 80% of the knife, I would sharpen it the same way on the steel. I think if you want to just like hit the tip, it's a little bit harder to do like this. I would just kind of like get up there, like just use the top half of my steel and really just like work. The angle is going to be, you're gonna have to adjust the angle a little bit because of the way your knife curves, right? It's not just like toward the tip. It doesn't just keep going straight. It kind of like comes up a little bit in most times. So you're just gonna have to like, you really just wanna focus on, and I think this goes back to just like knowing your knife very well. Just like being able to sense like how the knife moves, like how it curves. So like when I'm just doing the tip of the knife, I kind of do like an arcing motion. It's not like straight. So I'll just so I don't know if you guys can see, but it's like much more of a, I'm like coming around the knife. And then I have this book. So one great way to tell if your knife is sharp, and I really hope my knife is sharp because this is embarrassing, is to take a piece of paper and just run your knife. Check. This is pretty sharp. To run your knife, you want to be able to make like a nice straight line through a piece of paper without really any resistance. It's actually very helpful because where your knife catches, if it's not sharp or if there's an edge or something that's not straightened out, you can tell sort of exactly where it happens. So just gonna try this. Like I get a very clean cut. So I'm sort of seeing, and this might actually be because I was sharpening the tip of the knife in the way that I was. These are old prep lists that I'm putting up, so this is very satisfying. It feels pretty good to me.
Liz asked if that's regular printer paper.
Yes, it is. You can use parchment. I think parchment newspaper is very popular among chefs.
Emma asks if how many times you hone it, which I think you a little bit addressed.
Right, so it depends on how often you use it. I probably hone it like every few times that I use it. Some people do it every time that they use it. So I think it's a preference thing. You can really feel when your edge becomes dull. And to do that,
like how many times you draw it down the steel, not how often.
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's like in terms of number, I don't know, between like 15 and 20 times on each side, I would say. You should be able to feel a difference after you home. I think it's more of a feel thing than like a number.
And Victoria asks if this is the same technique with serrated knives.
Serrated knives are a little tricky. You can hone them, you can put them on the steel. I would not do them as much though. I would really minimize the amount of time that you hone a serrated knife on a steel, because you're actually getting rid of the serrations in the knife as you put it on the steel. Like if I've done that to the point where like the serrated knife is no longer serrated. So I would just like do that as little as possible. Does anyone else have any questions on honing or knives or knife maintenance, sharpening?
So far we're so
types?
good. And if there are questions, I will shout them out.
Okay, great. So let's move on to knife cuts. One thing I like to tell people as they're getting ready to prep is to like just, I think it's maybe like a little bit of an OCD thing with chefs, but like if the station is not clean, if like things are not placed in an organized way, I get really stressed out. So for me, like being clean and organized, those are like the two most important things about beginning knife, like before you even think about cooking. In terms of setting up your station, I like to put a like wet paper towel or a wet kitchen towel under the board to help it stabilize, because you obviously don't want the board moving around as you're cutting, especially if your knives are sharp. One thing I also like to note is that the height of the table is actually really important for cutting like efficiently. I think if the table is too high or too low, your body's like not comfortable in it. You end up sort of like compensating for the height of the table, and that's usually not a great way to cut. So my like kind of rule of thumb is I want my table personally to be like around my belly button height. I definitely want my elbows to be above the height of the table, because you actually want to be cutting over your vegetables. Like you definitely want to have a little bit of a like angle down. So I don't want to be cutting like this. I want to kind of be cutting like this. Yeah. Got a little list. I got a little agenda on here. Okay, great. So I think we're gonna start with the knife work. I have a compost bowl that I always keep on my workstation whenever I'm cooking. So I just discard. It's like vegetarian, so like eggshells, coffee, like any vegetable scraps are great for that. I don't really put meat in here, but since we're not cooking meat today, that's not an issue. And then I'm also just gonna have, if you guys have a couple of like small bowls, like whatever, serving bowls or metal bowls, those are great too. Just to put your mise en place in. Okay, great. Let's start with onion. Everyone has their onion. So when I think about like what I'm prepping, I always think about like what is the final product and what are the steps like that I need to get there. So I think most of you guys know today, like we're doing a slaw, we're doing a chowder. For this slaw, I want to pickle some of the onions and I want to get that started right away. So that's why I'm like, let's do the onion first. So really like when you're prepping, I would just be like aware of what the final product is, like how you want to get there in the most efficient way. Because like cooking pleasurably for me is also about efficiency. Okay, I have a thing, like I really would like everyone to learn how to cut an onion in half properly. If you're not making onion rings, please do not cut your onion in half like this, please. Do not cut it through the equator. It's just going to make any sort of knife work that you're doing so much more difficult. Okay, so if you're making onion rings, God bless you. I love onion rings. Please don't hand me over. But if not, you really just like make sure you're cutting your onion half through the root. So through like following the lines, like the natural lines of the onion, you're just going straight through. not perpendicular to them. Great. So the other thing I always tell people is like when you're cutting an onion in half initially, you don't need to take the root off because depending on the knife cut that you're doing, sometimes the root is actually like the attachment to the root is very helpful. For example, if you're mincing, which we're gonna do. So you see, so I'm just gonna actually take off the tail of the onion, just enough so that it's flat, and then we're just gonna cut through. We're gonna cut through the root. So let's save half for right now. So with this half, we're gonna slice so that we can julienne the onion for the pickle. So I'm just taking off the first layer. And then for this cut, we are actually gonna we're just gonna nip off the root because we want the onion slices to like separate from themselves. So my onion is, the lines of the onion are parallel to me. And I'm just going to start from the right side because I'm right-handed and work my way across. And just like nice, even slices. And I always use the lines, the natural lines of the onion of any vegetable as like a guide. I think that vegetables are like inherently, they like want to be loved. And like, this is a way of loving them. You follow the natural curves. And this is a way of, I think, of respecting the ingredients. So we're just going to, I don't want to go very fast because I don't want people to feel pressured to do that. But I think the key is to be even and consistent. Just make sure that you feel good about like, we should talk about the claw also. But you want to make sure that you're slightly over your vegetable, that your knife is more or less perpendicular to your body. So like not all crazy angles, like really nice perpendicular, consistent. And your guiding hand, which in my case is my left hand, you obviously want to keep all your fingers, so you don't want to have them splayed out. So we call this the claw in culinary school. Basically, your fingertips should always be protected by your knuckles. Right, so no matter how fast you're cutting, you're never actually going to cut your fingers off because your knuckles are going to protect them. And I do know that this is like a very uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people. It's like a kind of awkward, and most people are like, why can't I just cut like this? I've never cut my fingers. I think that you are just like playing with fire if you do that. And also, I do believe that it's like a technique that will enable you to cook more efficiently, more pleasurably. So I think it's something to work on. So claw, left hand, you want your fingertips to be under your knuckles. And we're just gonna start slicing nice and even. And we're gonna do the whole onion. Once you're 2/3 of the way through, you might want to stop and just bring it down. And we'll just keep going. So all my onion scraps, or my onion slices, sorry, are going to go in the bowl. And while I have them here, I'm just gonna, if you guys have any vinegar and salt, I'm just gonna splash some onto these so they start pickling. I don't really cook with measurements or recipes. The thing that I love most about cooking is that it feels very intuitive for me. So I just put, I would say maybe like a ½ cup of apple cider vinegar, like whatever vinegar you have is fine. And then I'm just gonna season this with salt. Mix this up a little bit. So that's our first knife cut. These like beautiful onion slices. I'm gonna put these away for now. So let's move on to the second half of our onion. And I always like to have a dry towel, a kitchen towel, just to like keep the workspace clean. So second half of the onion, is everyone good? I'm not on the gallery view, so I can't see people, but Al, can you just give me a some kind of sign that everyone's alive and well. Have all their fingers.
Everyone seems to be alive. I don't know about well.
Do people want to like show their? Are people proud of their onion slices? Like, would they like to show them off to to the gallery, to the peanut gallery? No. Oh, Cassie.
Oh yeah. Wait, where's Cassie?
Oh, I'm seeing some slices.
Yeah. There's some very beautiful looking slices right now happening. Lily's got some really cool looking ones. Rissa, did I just see that? Yes. My dad has some really nice ones.
Oh, Victoria's on it. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, everything looks great. Okay, so those are pickled. Good.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Nabila asks real quick, can you talk a sec about salt and seasoning? How can you tell if it's enough, especially with veggies? I think you might be getting to that. I don't know if it's a good time to do it now.
Yeah, so right, seasoning to me is intuitive. I think like I try and sort of like, just because I know it's helpful for people, like when I'm seasoning, I sort of maybe put like a teaspoon of salt in this like amount of onions, and I will absolutely like taste it at some point and assess. So I just tend to, and the other thing I should say is I tend to use kosher salt, coarse kosher salt, because it's very familiar to me in the way that it feels. And so oftentimes I find that I don't need to taste things as much, because I can feel sort of like the level of seasoning by how much I'm putting in, because I'm just so like used to the texture of it. I do find that I tend to over season if I'm not careful with like sea salt or any sort of finer salt, because like if I'm taking a pinch of that, that's the same like level as the same amount as kosher salt, it will tend to be more salt because it's finer crystals. So it definitely depends on the kind of salt that you use. I also like kosher salt because I think there's less salinity in it. And so you have more of a like, I guess, I'm an aggressive seasoner, so I feel like having more wiggle room to season is, it works for me. But as far as like how much salt, I think that really depends on your palate. It depends on the kind of salt that you're using. It depends on what your dish, like what you want your dish to taste like. For like the pickle, for example, all I put in it right now was apple cider vinegar and salt. Maybe like a half cup of apple cider vinegar, maybe a teaspoon of salt. Of kosher salt, and then I'm going to, because I know that it's going into a coleslaw later that is also going to have more acid, more salt. We're going to put some orange in it, so I know there's like a lot of other seasoning elements that need to happen, so I'm tending to be a little bit more conservative at this point, knowing that I can always add more seasoning later. I think that's helpful. Okay, cool. So with the second half of the onion, we're gonna really have to blow through the rest of these vinaigrettes so we can have dinner on the table. But for the second half of the onion, we're going to mince it. This is a challenging knife skill, I would say. I didn't actually I took the hairy part off the root of my onion, but I actually tried to keep the root, because you do want, it is much easier to mince an onion when the root is still intact, when all these layers of onion are still connected to the root. And you'll sort of see why as we're doing this. So with mincing, if you want to fine mince, which is what I would like us to try tonight, what you want to do first is actually cut the onion parallel to your body. So consistent with the natural curves of the onion. And I think you want to try and do this depending on the size of your onion. You want to go through at least once, and maybe even twice. So once sort of like, if your knife is touching your board, if you go up a little bit, you can make one slice through here, and then go up a little bit more and make another slice. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shoot for 2. And again, like you see, my left hand has the claw. Great. My board is slipping a little bit, which is okay. And then I'm gonna turn my onion 90 degrees so that the lines are now coming at me, perpendicular to me. And I'm just going to run my knife following the curves of the onion, like as we did while we were slicing. So basically the same motion. And it's okay if your onion sort of separates like that. So again, nice and even. Consistency is, I think, very underrated when people are doing knife work. But when you do huge amounts of it, like industrially, I think consistency is one of the most important things. So I have this like sort of little pile of onion that kind of came off. There's a couple things you can do with this. I actually might just throw it into a pot because we're gonna make a quick vegetable stock. You could also just run your knife through this. At this point, the slices are fine enough. You'll get like a pretty good mince. So my strokes nice and even. My fingertips are tucked. And that's like the first part of our mince. I'm gonna put it in this bowl. And so this, like the rest of the onion, have a really nice tight claw, and you're just gonna cut through as closely, each stroke as tight as possible, because we really want this. This is more like you want to be able, like a lot of people use this. We're gonna be cooking it, but a lot of people like to use this as like a kind of mignonette. So like they will eat it raw with vinegar. You want the slice, it's almost like an onion brunoise. So you really want these pieces to be as tiny as possible. So I'm just starting opposite from the root end and just working my way through. Nice and even. This is not a race. So when I get to about this part, I have this much of an onion left, you can do a couple of things. You can flip it over so it's flat and then work your way around the rest of it. I'm actually gonna save it for our vegetable stock because I think this is plenty of minced onion. So you can see like that wasn't, I wasn't, that probably took like 45 seconds, but I feel like I have a pretty nice, like even onion mince to show for it. So that's all going into this bowl. How was everyone with that? Any questions?
No questions so far.
Great. So actually, if you guys have your like a soup pot out, can you throw your onion, whatever onion scraps that you had, so like including these guys, great, and stock. Just gonna keep this bowl on this pot on the stove for right now. Clear your board for your next knife cut. Okay, and because the vegetable stock, I want to put the corn cobs in, we're just gonna run through the corn cobs really quickly. We are just taking the kernels off, and then we're gonna use the cobs to make a quick corn stock that will be the base of our chowder. So I think with this, obviously we're cooking like nose to tail, but with vegetables, like same concept, you don't want to waste something that has a lot of inherent flavor in the cups. So there's a couple ways you can take kernels off the cob. Some people like to hold the corn vertically and just sort of strip it like this. Some people like to do it like this. It's kind of up to you. I actually do prefer doing it like this, but we can do one this way and one the other way. So I'm just cutting straight down and rotating the corn maybe like 45 degrees every time. But my knife angle and the where my knife is cutting through is not changing at all. I'm moving the vegetable, not my knife hand. Great. So I have one. This is going into the pot.
Did the minced onion just go in the pot as well?
No, the onion scraps go into the pot. The corn is going to go into a separate bowl from the minced onion because that's going into the soup at a later point. We'll just keep those separate. And then if you guys have another corn cup, we can try doing this the other way. So same concept, your knife isn't moving, it's the vegetable that you're moving as you cut through the cup. So my knife is still like perpendicular to my body. And I'm just rotating my vegetable to meet the knife where I want it to cut. So same thing, this cob is going in the stock. And you guys can actually get water into your stock pot and get that going. We're gonna throw a couple other vegetable scraps in it, but if your stock can cook for 15-20 minutes, that's like perfect. So I'm gonna put about a quart of water into my stock pot and then bring it up to a boil. So I'm kind of just covering the cobs and the onion scraps with that. I'm actually also going to season this a little bit. Seasoning as you go, I think, is really important. And we can talk a little bit about sort of how that builds layers of flavor when we start cooking the other things. Okay, so I'm sorry, I am so slow. My goodness. Okay, I have garlic. We're gonna mince this very finely. This is going to go with our onion mince, and this is going to be part of the base for flavor for our corn chowder. I feel like there's like 100 million ways to peel garlic. For me, it really depends on the function of the garlic. So how am I going to cut it? If I'm mincing it, I will just smash it because the more broken up it is, the easier it is to mince, less work for your knife. If you're doing like very nice, like delicate knife work, you want like really thin, lovely slices of garlic that you maybe want to fry, then obviously you want to take more care in peeling it. So with this preparation for tonight, we're just mincing. So I'm just going to take the flat edge of my knife, and I'm going to hit the opposite edge. So and this way the peel comes off nice and easy. And the garlic is pretty much already like pulverized, so you'll be chopping it less. Cool, so I have 4 garlic cloves here, and we're gonna mince the garlic. So how I like to mince is kind of clump the garlic together so it looks more or less, I like to think of it as like now it's just like one big clove that I'm slicing my knife through. And I'm trying to go as finely as possible, but I'm just slicing straight through. Cool. So again, thinking of all these like mashed up pieces of garlic as one cohesive unit is pretty helpful for slicing through it.
Can Amy do something about the camera?
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect. And then I have this little mound that I've just sliced through. I'm gonna sort of rotate the whole thing 90 degrees and do the same thing. pretend it's like one big clove of garlic, and then just rub my knife. As finely as possible. Any stray guys you just like collect, bring back into the fold. Okay, cool. And then the last thing I'm gonna do, like this looks pretty good to me, but I also want to do a little bit more to sort of like break down the cell structure of the garlic to release more flavor. And so what I like to do with garlic, so I'm collecting it again with my knife, one big clove, and then I'm actually going to use the flat edge of my knife and just kind of like work my way through the, like this motion. And what that's going to do is basically press these like little bits of garlic into the wood, into my wood board, and sort of release the juice inside and break down the cell walls. Can do this again so you guys can see. So I'm pretty happy with this mince. Just gonna throw it in with the onions. Clean my board. And we're gonna keep moving. Celery. I actually, this is a little bit controversial, but I do like to peel celery because I do feel like the threads on the outsides can be a little bit like unpleasant to eat. You certainly don't have to do that. That's entirely a preference, but since I'm making a vegetable stock, I can use it's not like I'm throwing out the peels, I can like actually repurpose them. So I'm actually going to, if you have a peeler, just sort of like lightly take the peeler to the outside of the celery and sort of get off any of this like stringy stuff that you can. Great. And these peels can go straight into the vegetable stock. Cool. So the celery, we are going to julienne and then brunoise. So julienne is basically like a little matchstick. The brunoise is technically a cube that is 1/8 of an inch all around. I'm going to take off the very edges of the celery, or the very ends. This is going to go into the stock. Surprise, surprise. And then with the julienne, the length is usually about 2 inches. So I'm just going to look at this and cut off 2-inch segments of the celery. This I'm going to throw into my salt. So let's start. So this guy is like not so happy. I might also mix them. So with these nice 2-inch slice segments of celery, we're just going to work our way around them and create nice rods, nice even rods. The nice thing about celery is that it's sort of naturally predisposed to being julienne. I'm actually not going to do all this because I want to make sure we get to everything else. And then once you have this julienne, so I can hear, one of the things I really like about cooking is that it's not just about the things that you can see or taste, it's also, it involves all of your senses. And so like we're cutting the celery, I can hear that the stock is bubbling behind me, so I'm just gonna turn it down a little bit. You don't really want stock to be bubbling too much or else it'll reduce. So Does everyone have some nice celery slices? Yes. Okay. I'm gonna take about half of them. I want to show you guys a brunoise like very quickly. A brunoise is basically a julienne that you then slice into cubes. So like we talked about, julienne is 2 inches, about 2 inches long by an eighth of an inch thick. A brunoise is a cube that is an eighth of an inch thick. Therefore, a brunoise is a julienne that is cut into cubes. So we have our nice slices of celery. We're just going to work our way through them to create like even little cubes that we're going to add to our onion and onion and garlic mix. And this is going to be the base. We're going to start cooking this. This will be the base for our cheddar. So again, nice and even. And you really like want to hear your vegetables nice and crispy as your knife is slicing through them. It's a very satisfying sound. So I'm going to do the rest of the celery that I've julienned. And I don't know if you guys can see that well, but I am certainly I feel over my celery, and I feel like my knife is definitely coming in at an angle. It's not like straight across the board. And my left hand fingers are very well protected. So I've got celery brunoise that's about the same size as my onion and garlic, and this is really important when we talk about cooking. Especially since these are being cooked together, they're the base for our soup. You want to make sure that these vegetables are like about the same size, so that, for example, the garlic does not burn before the onion, and celery is like nice and toasty. So really, when you're cooking, it's important to think about the size that things are being cut. You want them to be consistent, like when you're making sofrito or when you're mincing ginger and garlic for a stir fry. Consistency is incredibly important in the final product of your dish. So we've got, I think I've got maybe about like 2 parts onion to 1 part celery to like a half part of garlic. Which is sort of a happy place for me. I'm gonna get the rest of these vegetables cut very quickly, and then we're gonna move to the stove. And we have 20 minutes, so this might be like an expedited version. So the carrot, I want to show you 2 knife cuts very quickly. One is what we've already done, which is a julienne with the celery. We'll also do with the carrot. And then with this sort of like thinner part of the carrot, I want to show you guys what I think is a really cool vegetable cut called oblique. So basically, I'm going to, again, holding my knife like perpendicular to my body. The carrot's kind of at a 45-degree angle to the knife. And I'm going to make like a weird triangle cut to the carrot. I don't know if you guys can see this. And then I'm going to, knife is in the same place. I'm going to rotate the carrot 180 degrees. I'm going to make the same cut. Again, rotate, same cut. So you end up with these like funky 3D triangle blobs that actually look really lovely when they're cooked. So these we're gonna put into our chowder. Hope everyone kind of has the same sort of globs. I'm gonna put this in with the corn for now, but this, right? And then very quickly with the top half, the thickest part of your carrot, we're gonna work on the julienne again. It's very important, especially with round vegetables, that you cut your first cut on the vegetable gives you a flat edge. You don't really want your carrot rolling around while you're cutting. So I'm just gonna make a very thin cut through the right edge. So that'll give me a nice flat surface. This piece can go on your stock. And now I'm just going to make, again, we talked about julienne, 2 inches by 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm looking for slices of carrot that are about 1/8 of an inch thick. I can do one more. Okay, I'm gonna keep this on the side. I might snack on it. And then for the julienne, we're just gonna run our knife through these slices that we've made. And you can do this a couple of ways. You can stack your carrots sort of like in 2s to help you do this a little bit faster. What I actually like to do though is sort of shingle them. And this is entirely a personal thing. But I like to shingle them.
Can you touch your phone?
Yes.
Thank you.
I like to shingle them and just run the knife through them. I find this to be easier because the level of the height of your knife never changes. And you can just, honestly, I've like lined up an entire like double cutting board with this and just like walked my way through. So I find it to be a little bit more like easy on your cutting hands. So again, nice and even. I'm gonna straighten this out a little bit. Okay. So this carrot julienne is actually going to go in our cabbage slaw. So I'm gonna throw it into the bowl with the pickled onions. Everyone good? Okay, the potato is very, I think is probably a simpler knife cut, and so we're gonna blow through it. We're just gonna cut the potato into a large dice, which if you wanna get technical is 3/4 of an inch, a square that's 3/4 of an inch. So again, first rule of thumb with a vegetable that's not flat is create a flat edge. I think I'm gonna do it pretty thin. This potato scrap can go into your stock. And then I think my potato is actually quite, it's quite flat. So I actually think that I'm only gonna need to cut it in half to make my large dice. So I'm cutting it in half through the middle and then approximating 3/4 of an inch. And you will inevitably lose some of your potato because potatoes are not naturally square. And then I'm just going to make squares as best as I can. I think one of the decisions that chefs constantly make, and like home cooks also, is like what is the proportion of vegetable scrap that you want to the quality of the knife cuts that you have. Like certainly someone could have square this off so that you had a perfect potato square, a cube. I prefer to leave this on because I don't want to waste like a little bit. that you lose when you create a perfect square. So this is like entirely a personal decision of like aesthetic sort of consistency versus how much scrap you generate. So my potato is going into the same bowl as the carrot and corn. And then very quickly, we're going to cut our cabbage. And the cabbage, we're also going to julienne. And the nice thing about cabbage is that it sort of naturally wants to be julienne, cut into very thin slices. So I have half a cabbage. I'm going to cut it through the center so that the core is split in half. And then I'm actually going to take out the core because I want the leaves to be able to separate. So I'm kind of approaching it at an angle and just cutting through to get rid of this very hard part. Do the same thing for the other side. Again, cutting through the stem. And then I turn the cabbage 90 degrees. And what I'm gonna do, I think, is take the outer half of the cabbage and start with this half. So I've got the inner half over here, just put that aside. I wanna start with this outer half. And I'm just gonna run my knife through as thinly as possible. So again, looking for a julienne, a very thin, sort of like 2-inch segment of vegetable. Obviously, like this part, the pointy part is not going to be 2 inches. That's okay. This is not an exact science. This is also called a chiffonade, and you'll see later when we're doing our vegetables, when we're doing our herbs, you can also chiffonade herbs. Slow and steady with rice. The cabbage is going to go in a separate bowl. This is the base for our slaw. And I'm very quickly going to do the inner core, the inner half of the cabbage. This part is a little bit tricky because the edge is not quite, when it's flat, it's a little bit, it's not like quite even. So I'm just going to take a little bit more care with this. And I'm actually going to flip this so that it's easier. Okay. So nice chiffonade of cabbage. You guys, if you want to, can do the other half. If you think you have enough cabbage, you can roll with that one. I'm just going to quickly do a little bit more so you can see one more time. And nice flat. And I can hear from the way that my knife is slicing into the cabbage that it's pretty sharp. I'm hearing like a lot of crispness and not a lot of like muddiness. Okay, I'm gonna hold off on the orange so that we can get started with cooking.
And Hannah, I think you know this, but you got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, right. We can do this in 10 minutes.
Amazing.
I think. So if you guys have a skillet, you can get your skillet on medium to high heat. I'm gonna go high because 10 minutes. I'm gonna put a couple tablespoons of olive oil into my pan. Again, that's like an estimate. I'm gonna let that get hot before I add any vegetables. And again, so we're starting with our onion, celery, and garlic mince. And that's gonna be the base for our corn chowder. While that's heating up, I'm going to add the onion that's sort of been marinating in ginger or in vinegar. The carrots, I'm going to add this to our cabbage. So this is like our slaw now. We can just finish seasoning it. Slaw is great because it's not one of those salads where you sort of dress at the last minute. Actually, the longer that it sits in dressing, the better I think it tastes. So we have vinegar in here already because of the onion that I was pickling. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil, maybe a quarter cup for this amount. I'm going to add a little bit more salt because we added cabbage. And I'm going to mix it here. Sorry, cough drinking. How are you guys all doing?
I don't think it's there anymore. Yeah, it's not there. Is the phone on? Oh.
Hannah, I think I accidentally muted you. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. How is the angle on the stove?
I don't see it. Ah, there it is.
Can you scooch it over to your right a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And can you do that flippy thing again?
Yeah, kind of like tilt it a little bit.
Whoa. This is trippy. We're like upside down.
Oh.
I think just keep moving it.
Oh, we're getting there. Yes. Steve asks, what's in the current bowl?
You keep cooking.
Meaning onion and celery and garlic, I believe.
Yep, that's correct.
Great.
Yeah, I'm having trouble switching the screen.
Okay. Can Amy?
Yep. So I'm gonna keep cooking while our technical director makes the adjustment.
Everybody say hi to Amy and thank you to Amy.
Just keep going.
Okay. So I'm gonna switch your video for the moment. Hi Amy.
So the oil is very close to smoking. I don't know if you guys can see a little bit. It's definitely shimmering, so this is like kind of the perfect time to add our vegetables. You're going to hear a really nice sizzle, which is exactly what you want. And I'm going to let that go on medium heat for a couple of minutes. Adding a little bit of salt. And while that's going, I'm going to strain the stock that we made.
Thanks for hanging in with us, everybody.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna strain these vegetables that have been simmering for about 15 minutes. These are going into my compost bin. And since we're almost out of time, I just want to walk you guys through the rest of the cooking process. The cabbage slaw essentially is done. I would check for seasoning. I'll probably add some black pepper. I like my slaws like very vinegary, very acidic. And so this is like entirely a preference thing. So I'll taste for salt, for acid, for balance. I also want to throw some herbs in here at the end. So if you guys have parsley or cilantro, give that a quick chop. Definitely don't discard your cilantro stems because there's a lot of great flavor in there. Your slaw is essentially done. I do want to very quickly, I don't think that everyone will have time to do this, but if you do after the class, show you a supreme of citrus. It's just like a really delightful way to add a little bit of flair to like a very simple cabbage slaw, for example. So with the citrus, I'm just going to create 2 flat edges at the top and bottom.
Oh shit. Hey, Hannah, you just froze on my end. I don't know if you have frozen for other people too. No. Can everybody see Hannah? No.
Yes, but it's frozen.
Oh, okay, the phone's done. Okay. Wait, so Hannah, we're gonna go to your phone now. So if you can, hi. Okay, everybody, thank you for bearing with us. We are gonna get Hannah back in like a hot sec. Or actually, maybe are we gonna go to Amy? If Amy's phone is on? We might be seeing Amy in a minute. So while we're waiting for Hannah to come back, how is everybody's stock looking? If you want to like unmute yourselves and chime in, because I can't hear you now. Hello. Oh,
It tastes great.
cool. Amy is on. Amy, can you unmute yourself? There we go. Say hi. I can't hear you right now, Hannah. Maybe Amy turn the sound on. Hello? You want to say something, Amy? Still can't hear you.
Now, what happens with the corn, potato, and carrot?
What happens with the potato and carrots?
And corn, right?
Corn.
Those
I
are-
think those are going in the stock.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Amy, you are unmuted right now on my end. Can you try to say something else?
So okay, that makes sense.
And Dad, you are on sound, just FYI right now. How's everybody else doing? Anybody want to chime in? No? This is fun. This is the first time, speaking of technical glitches, this is our first like actual technical glitch of the series, which is like pretty freaking impressive, I think, given how many
I have a question.
Yeah, hi, Krista.
So I have like the garlic and celery and onion on the stove. Like, what's next after that?
You have the onion, garlic, and celery on the stove. What's next after that?
Yes.
If only I knew. See, I am not a chef. Unlike, I want to say though, wait, do we have Amy back? No, not yet. Thank you, Dusty. I want to say, so I saw Hannah like zhuzhing it around in the stove or on the skillet, and I want to say she is making like a little fry. I'm not sure what it's called, but that's gonna like release some flavor. Oh, Amy, are you maybe there? I can hear your feedback. Okay, I can hear myself now. Amy, if you can, or the iPad. Okay. I don't know where you went. But yeah. Oh,
Hi.
Hi, you're back. Hello.
Are we back?
Yes.
So sorry about that. Okay, so while we were away, I added the stock to the onion, celery, and garlic that you guys had been sauteing. So now we have the corn stock with the onion, celery, and garlic. And then I'm gonna add the rest of our vegetables to this mix. And these are gonna cook, you just need to cook them until they're tender. So potatoes, maybe 10-15 minutes if you're on high heat. I'm gonna put this on high and cover it so that it keeps cooking. Great. And then very quickly, I just want to finish showing you guys the orange supreme that we were working on earlier. So basically, I'm sorry that you missed it, but I had, if you could sort of imagine, I had taken all of these like skins around the orange off. Boom. And then what we're gonna do with this is just take out the flesh of the orange, and we're gonna add this to our cabbage slaw. And I'm doing it over the slaw bowl because I want to make sure that all the juice like gets into the slaw as well. That's gonna help season it. And when we supreme, you wanna make sure that your knife is sort of against the edge of the pith of the skin of the orange. And we're just gonna attack it from the other side. So you're really just identifying where the segments are and working your way around the flesh. This is really not necessary. It's just kind of a fancy way to enhance your dining experience. And I have one more supreme. And what I'm gonna do with the rest of this skin, I'm actually gonna eat this guy. Oh no, he's okay. The rest of the skin, I'm just gonna squeeze to get all this juice in because I didn't add any sugar to my slaw. So the orange juice is going to give a little bit of natural sweetness. And I actually tasted my slaw while we were dealing with our technical difficulties, and it tasted great to me. I did add a little bit more acid. But like this is obviously super simple, just like very bright. Now would be the perfect time to add your parsley and cilantro. Which I am gonna do very quickly so we can plate it. You guys can see how beautiful it is. Again, as I said before, like no need to peel or pick the cilantro stems, cilantro leaves from the stems. Like everything is really delicious here. And I'm just going to rough chop this. So I kind of crumpled up as I was telling you guys about the garlic before when we kind of like bunched everything together as if it were one coherent piece. That's how I like to think about the herbs as well. And then we're just going to run our knives through it, and really how big the chopping is or how big the pieces are, it's really up to you. I actually really like big pieces of cilantro and other herbs in my salads, so I'm gonna go pretty chunky on this. So like maybe quarter, half-inch slices, and that's all I'm gonna do for this. like nice and rustic. So that's going into the slaw. I'm gonna mix this up and plate it. So everything that was in this slaw, just pickled onions, cabbage, olive oil, salt. I put a little pepper into while you guys weren't looking, and whatever herbs that you want to finish it with. And I think this is plenty of cabbage for like 2 people. So that's one dish. How is everyone looking for that dish? I know we're running late, so is there any chance that we could take like a few questions for 5 minutes before people check out?
Yes. So
were there questions that we missed?
what's that?
Did we miss any questions while we were away?
Not well. Rissa, did your question get answered?
It did. It did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jessica asks if you can do a close-up of how you hold the knife. Jessica, what do you mean? When do we want to be holding the knife? And Grace asks, what cutting board do you use?
Oh, I just have a wood cutting board. Actually, Allison makes great cutting boards if anyone is in the market for a cutting board.
Cute, thanks. Hannah asks, are the scallions for the chowder?
Yeah, the scallions would be great on top of the chowder as a garnish. I was just going to thinly slice them. Yeah, just straight through. You can also save the onion, the scallion whites, since they are a little bit more oniony. If you want to use that separately, I like to save those for fried rice or anything that you can sort of like saute. But the greens I like to put on something like a chowder. I'm just keeping an eye on my chowder. I think it needs probably like 5 or 10 more minutes for the potatoes and carrots to cook. But really all I'm gonna do after, you wanna come over? So basically right now I have the stock, the corn, the celery, the onion, the potato, and the carrots here. I'm gonna taste this for sure. I really wanna taste like sweetness from the corn stalk and the corn kernels, the savoriness from your onion, celery, garlic mix. You obviously wanna taste for some salinity from the salt. I think even for this kind of preparation, if you're not vegetarian, I would like to throw a little fish sauce in this. I think it adds a little bit of like depth of flavor that sort of enhances the salinity from the salt. So I'm gonna let this cook, and then you can just taste your potatoes and carrots in 5 or 10 minutes once they're cooked to the way that you like them, whether it's al dente or mushy. I'm just gonna finish mine with a little bit of milk or half and half, just to give it a little bit of creaminess, like unctuousness, because everything in here, like aside from the olive oil that we started with this with, there's not a lot of fat, and so you kind of want more balance of flavor. So yeah, that's sort of where this dish is going. I would like to show you the finished product. I have all of your email addresses, so I can certainly email you my dinner later tonight, and you can also email me your dinner. I like to see your finished products.
Emma asks, what's the sugar for?
The sugar was if you wanted to add more sweetness to your cabbage slaw, especially if you're using a pickling liquid. Most of the time, pickling liquid has some sugar in it. I didn't use it because we were putting the orange in, and so I wanted to make sure that it didn't become too sweet from the sugar. And if you have a sweet enough orange, oftentimes I think you can omit the sugar, but it's really about preference.
Do you have a minute to answer a couple knife questions?
Yeah.
Cool. Jessica asks which she wanted to clarify what fingers are where on the handle of the knife. And related, kind of, Hannah earlier had asked, when you sharpen, should the motion be towards or away from you?
Great. So great questions. If you're just using the knife for these sort of basic knife cuts, how I recommend holding it. I think the question from Jessica, was that like how you hold it with your dominant hand? Or is it how you position your fingers on your
Yes, on your dominant hand.
Your dominant hand. Okay. So the way that I like to hold it is I like to hold it where the bolster of the knife is, so where the handle meets the blade. I find that I have the best control when I'm pinching the part of the blade where it meets the bolster. A lot of people kind of hold their knives back here. I don't actually find that effective at all. I think you lose a lot of control the farther back you are. So I really identify this part, and this is where sort of the style of the knife that you choose comes into play. You want a knife that when you hold it here, where you have maximum control, feels like really balanced in your hand. So I'm pinching this part of the knife. My thumb is on one side, my index finger is on the other, and the other 3 fingers of my right hand are resting against the handle of the knife. Can you do the other side? Thumb side.
Great, thank you. Grace earlier had wondered if you have any tips or tricks for onions not tearing up while you're cutting them.
Sharp knife. That is the absolute cure for that. If you have a sharp knife, you will do less damage to the cell walls of the onions, and that is usually what makes people tear up. Because once you start damaging the cell walls, if your knife is blunt, you just create more friction when you're slicing through the knife. That's going to release all of the, that's going to activate the molecular what process that creates teary eyes. So definitely this is like such a great question and totally related to what we've been talking about tonight. But if you have a really sharp knife, that should help a lot with minimizing any sort of tearing up from aliums.
Makes sense why I always cry while I cut onions.
Was there a question between Jess and Hannah that you said that I might have missed?
You just answered them.
Okay.
And the milk, do we need to worry about the milk?
Yeah, so I mentioned once the potatoes and carrots are finished cooking in the corn chowder, I'm gonna add the milk, half and half, whatever you have, or not, if you don't want to add that to your chowder. But I do feel like it will add a little bit of richness and unctuousness and like deliciousness to your chowder at the end. So I wouldn't add dairy until the very end because it has a tendency to break if you cook it for too long, especially milk. So I'm gonna let my chowder continue cooking down. I'm like looking at the consistency of it right now. I like I said earlier, I used about a quart of water when I was making my stock. I feel like that's creating a really nice consistency for my soup. And then I'm just gonna top it off with a little bit of half and half. And probably a lot of black pepper too. Because I think corn, black pepper play really nicely together.
And scallions be a garnish?
And the scallions will be a garnish, yeah, exactly.
So we are about out of time, aka we are out of time. Does anybody have any last questions that they want to drop in the chat box? And we won't be able to get to those right now, but I will have Hannah email the group after. So you have like 2 minutes, 120 seconds to drop your questions in the chat box. What's the butter for? Emma asks.
Oh, the butter was as an alternative to olive oil if you wanted to saute, because like everyone loves corn and butter. So if you wanted to start with that as your base instead of olive oil, you could have absolutely done that. And sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier.
Cool. While everybody is still sticking their questions in the box, Hannah, do you want to share where people can find you? Where's the best place to learn about you? Keep up with you beyond your email?
Yeah, you have my email address. Feel free to email me anytime with questions. I'm on Instagram at Hannah C. Wong. And my restaurant account is at HaemaBK, HAEMABK. And hopefully we'll be opening sometime next year. We'll see what life is like in the next few months. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight and for supporting the Level Up project. Really appreciate it.
And
Thank
yes,
you, Hannah.
echoing that, Hannah, thank you all so much for being here, for participating in our inaugural workshop. Apologies that we just ran a little bit over time. We got started a little late, and then thank you for bearing with us with our technical glitches. Again, the workshop has been recorded, and you'll be getting an email link with this recording about a week after session 1. The chowder is amazing. Yay, Cassie. So somebody's having dinner already. Thank you all so much. I think we're gonna go ahead and end this now. Have a great night, everybody. Enjoy your dinners. So great to see you.
Good job, Hannah.
Thanks.
Bye.